Is the show set in the same universe as the Netflix show?
For sure.
100%.
Okay.
I'd consider it a 4th season.
It's not entirely unpleasant seeing you again.
Do we know where this fits into She-Hulk? Obviously, you were in She-Hulk. It's before this, I guess? Or?
Yeah, certainly before. You know, what happens in LA stays in LA. You know, I think it's like, I think it's a case of like, whatever was going on with Matt in that period of time, he was able to leave that at JFK.
Right.
When he got on the plane, and
yeah.
Tell me more about that.
They do this thing. We're put in these positions all the time.
Yeah.
But I will just say, because it's my favorite thing to say, our job is to service a story.
Yeah.
And when it's put in front of us from a company like Marvel, you were like, okay, I'll service that story to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
You know, that's what our job is.
Yeah.
If you take the Matt Murdock from our show and you put him in She-Hulk as is, he's probably overly serious and becomes the butt of all jokes.
Exactly.
Right.
So he's got to adapt to the tone, and there's precedent within the comics. There are many runs of the comics where there's a lot of levity, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek, there's a lot of fun.
And Hawkeye was the same for me.
Right, it's an opportunity
whole
to
different
have fun
tone.
with that. You know, and maybe we'll get, maybe at some point we'll get to see the favor returned.
You heard it, guys. Season 2, right?
Yeah, it's just like, this is frustrating, is every time this topic comes up, you just say cryptic stuff like, what happens in LA stays in LA.
Yeah.
And like, you're like, and they're like, what is it? And you're just like, I'll tell you guys when I know you better.
Yeah.
That's still where we're at, you know? We're still...
You got to get to like season 3 place with these guys, and then you'll find out. Right?
It's funny, like how many opinions I've heard about this little moment. Like in the She-Hulk, there's the Walk of Shame, you know, which was kind of a last-minute idea that they set up a big green screen and just had me walk across it carrying my shoes. And a lot of people don't like it, and a lot of people love it.
Is the show set in the same universe as the Netflix show?
For sure.
100%.
Okay.
I'd consider it a 4th season.
Okay.
It's a new path. We kind of blow it up, the past, but it's there and it's connected. And the way that we finally ended up doing it worked really well. And I think it needed the connection to the Netflix show. It needed the other characters to come back. It needed all the familiar faces. It needed to be there. And the other iteration wouldn't have had that. It was a straight up, hey, forget what you just saw. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
That was tough for me to swallow. And I really felt, I know we felt emotional about not having the others back.
Yeah.
Because our success in that show, we believe, is not just because of us and the writing. We believe it's because of the whole cast and the writing. But the cast made, Eldon and Deborah, those characters are theirs now. Nobody will ever play those characters as well as they did, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And they needed to be part of the family. They needed to be part of that warm hug.
And I yell it, yeah.
Yeah, and I yell it, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I would think, so for someone like me who it's my job to dissect the MCU and everything, I can understand like alternate universe or whatever, but like I was just telling Brian before we started here, my wife's best friend, who's, she's a mom, like she was so excited to hear I was talking to the Daredevil people today. She doesn't usually care what I do for a job, and she loved the Netflix show. She would watch it with her son. Now, when she sits down to watch Born Again, she's not gonna understand if it's just you guys and then other actors playing other familiar characters. Like the more mainstream audience, I don't think is going to get that, so.
That's a very familiar sentence that you just said.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're very conscious of that.
Got it. So what was that your mission statement when you guys were brought in, was to kind of like just get us a little bit back to that?
Yeah.
I mean,
other than just be good directors.
Yeah.
it's interesting because I think all we really knew was that we were massive fans of the Netflix show. I grew up a fan of the comic books, and you're going into something where you need to respect and honor both that show and the original comic books. But something from the show specifically that we wanted to make sure we got right was that, again, that all this violence has consequences. And so right after that warm hug, when that event happens in the show, that event, it feels like it rippled out through every character in the show in a way like it does in real life. There's no resolution in the third act and everything's okay. Everyone's still dealing with this grief going forward. And
that's very true, yeah.
what's funny is that you've probably never heard filmmakers reference like Hereditary, more like the movie Hereditary, the A24 movie, more during a superhero or action thing than you've like. It was our reference points were so so sad.
Yeah, this to us was a tragedy, you know, and that was definitely part of the pivot too. Is that this was a very doomed season, you know. It's part of the camera language as well. We talked a lot about like I think we talked about like the kind of premonition of having to put the cowl back on, you know, and or the mask back on. Yeah.
When you say doomed, explain what you mean.
Well, this is a descent. You know, like this whole season is a descent. You're watching a slow motion train crash, you know, with people that you love and you really don't want,
I mean, in the end,
see them hurt,
where
you know?
it's the two leads are broken people and they don't get fixed.
Right. How did you guys balance the depiction of violence, since it's, I mean, this is an R-rated series, but it is a Disney Plus Marvel show now, as opposed to the Netflix, right? I mean, there's a difference there. Was that like, was it just kind of like, screw it, we're just doing what we want, or?
we did some things on this show that Aaron and I literally were behind monitor, just like, and as two people who have made a lot of sci-fi horror films, a lot of stuff like that. There were practical effects in this show behind monitor. We're just like I think after we saw the take, like, we didn't know you could do that. It just happened in camera, and it should be said that Vincent should get a lot of credit for one of the biggest gags in the show. You were a team leader on that, and it benefited.
Yeah. But still, after we accomplished it so well, you know, we got to give credit to the special effects.
Yeah.
But it was all practical. After we accomplished it, and I went home that night, the first thing, once I got in the car and I got away from these guys, and everybody else, because it went so well, I thought it's never going to be in the show, no matter what.
Oh, really?
promises. Yeah.
Really? Oh, man,
I mean, come on, like
you're like writing up an
it's
angry email
crazy.
already. Put it back in the show.
No, it was, well, yeah, sort of. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, sort of. But I mean.
It's in the show?
It's in the show.
It's in the show.
Yeah. And then also like
to the T, like no softening it up, no nothing.
I mean, we did a couple of sequences where
Oh my gosh, yes.
there was a moment in the sequence where we had to do an alternative.
Yeah.
Because the likelihood is it wouldn't, that leg break or that whatever wouldn't be in. And without exception, every one of the more brutal, more violent breaks or moments or pieces of action is in our show. So
And you know, some terribly emotional stuff.
Sure.
You know, with real emotion, not superhero emotion, but real people emotion.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
like some deep stuff happens. So you have all this. You have some funny stuff. You have a lot of action, and you have real relationships that are failing and succeeding and failing and succeeding through the whole story.
Yeah.
I would say it should be said as we all geek out and have giggles about how good the practical effects are, which they are. I mean, it might be, I don't know, but it should be said too that, you know, yes, it gives it scope. Yes, it's, no matter what, it's interesting, it's a talking point, but the only reason it works is because we're showing a consequence of the actions of people who are doing things that are grotesque, and it's sort of it's a manifestation of their pain, and it's not romanticizing it.
Well said.
It's showing how grotesque that pain can be.
Well said.
And making it feel even more human.
Yeah, with conviction and
often it's not like for fun. It's something you kind of want to look away from.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, well, like when Matt is like after a fight scene, I know this, like he's like breathing so heavily, which I'm sure is in part because of the physicality of the scene, but it feels like there's something more there in his response when the fight is over. He's breathing that way for emotional reasons as well, or at least that's the way I read it.
Yeah. I mean, we've always tried to do that on their show. We've always tried to make sure that every punch or kick is almost like a line of dialogue. That there's a reason for it to be there. And where possible, you know, I'm not trying to excuse the violence of a show, but where possible, always make sure that it's not just grotesque for the sake of.
And I think there's a humility that both of our characters carry around that help that. Like I know you've heard me say this before, but one of the things as a young actor, one of my favorite actors to watch, it started with Gary Cooper when I was a kid, but it ended up to be more Harrison Ford, where anytime they were in a fight or they were holding a gun, they looked nervous.
Yeah.
You know, they carried their own humility into the action scenes with them. And I always thought that was the way to go. Like, that made it look real to me. Yeah. You know, you see Harrison Ford standing, waiting for somebody around the corner. He's got a gun and his hand is shaking.
Yeah.
You know, he's shaking.
Yeah.
And Gary Cooper and Sergeant York, when he takes aim, when he becomes the sniper, you know, it's the humility in his eyes that you see. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, so, I think that helps action stuff a lot. I think we're all very conscious of that.
Big time.
Yeah. Yeah. Uncertainty generally. I mean, that's in all the action and in the and in so much of the performances.
Yeah.
Is like, you know, we have everything's kind of slipping through his fingers in a way, and it's a broad theme through the season where things, like the more that they grasp on, the more it slips through their fingers. But for both of them, you know.
Yeah.
And even at the very, very end, there's still like that glint of uncertainty in everybody's eyes, you know, where you just don't know what the future holds.
Right.
And that's it's incredibly important because it makes them human. It shows their vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because imagine the opposite. Like certainty, you know, like certainty, success, gloating, all of that is like, it's not very complicated. You know?
When the Netflix show ended, did you think you'd ever be back as these characters, especially in this capacity with a new show and everything?
Well, we actually had a very different experience as it pertains to this. So I was convinced we were done. And, you know, when we got that phone call in 2018, I moved on emotionally, obviously being quite sad about the whole thing. But Vincent and I would talk occasionally, and he was convinced that at some point we would get a phone call and we'd be back, and I would get off the phone and think that he was crazy. Yeah, when I heard from Kevin Feige in 2020, I was shocked, blown away.
You know, we all knocked it out of the park with the Netflix show. My sons turned me on to all these Avenger movies that the MCU was making, and I just figured there must be a bunch of clever people over there. They're knocking out of the park every movie. You know, why wouldn't they recognize good stuff when they see it?
Justin and Aaron, when the show starts, Matt has actually put away the suit. He's not Daredevil anymore. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking behind that? Like, why is he not Daredevil anymore?
Yeah. The entire season, he and also in some ways Fisk is denying part of their true selves, right? And they're trying to work within a system. And so there's an extremely pivotal event that happens that causes him to put it away. And the event has to be huge. It has to be incredibly important because it's going to change a core piece of like who he is. And so, you know, we wanted to make sure that we told that story right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the prior show on Netflix being genuinely the masterpiece that it is, to us, one of the reasons why that was because you guys really did achieve making these guys feel human. There's consequence to everything. And it wasn't just in the drama, it wasn't just in the tragedy, it was in the consequence of violence. And so to start off the show with the ultimate act of violence and how that grief ripples out to the rest of it seemed like the perfect way to kick off this continuation of the spirit of that.
Yeah. And this show is, because you guys obviously have done Moon Knight and Loki, which were obviously MCU shows, but more traditionally superhero-y. Like, obviously Daredevil is always more grounded in reality. Was it a kind of a big change for you to have to jump into something like this?
No, we kind of took to it like ducks in water because, you know, in our indie film world, we're very often telling a story that's a two-hander, and it's very much about like the stakes of those two people, you know? And so for us, we were really excited where the stakes, of course, they're sky high, but they're emotional. You know, there really is what's going to happen to these two people and the people that they love and care about. And of course, there's the stakes of the city of New York and all of that. But the reason you're there is not worrying about these buildings. You're worrying about the people within them. and that came really naturally to us. The idea of not having supernatural stakes felt great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Everything these guys are saying to you right now is just total nonsense. No, everything they're saying to you right now is why I love them as directors. They're like my favorite directors ever now, and they are just incredible. And that's because they think
you
the way
haven't worked
they
with
think.
any good directors.
Yeah, right. The guy who works with Kubrick.
I mean, honestly, though, it was really important to Charlie and I to get incredible writers, incredible directors. I think that anybody would be lucky to have these two at the helm of anything they're doing. It really. I never had to worry about a thing. I knew that when they were directing, all I had to do was show up, do my shtick. They would tell me if I was getting it wrong. And I'd get it right. And that's it. That's it.
All right, this is
Yeah, he just showed up. That's what's happened. Yeah.
this is going to get really cheesy, so I'm gonna love it on this. But this should be said: is like the challenge of this show for us was not that it was grounded and that it was more human than other superhero content, but really it was that the bar was set so high with the Netflix show and you have such an admiration for it, you have such a respect for it, and going into this, it needs to reach that bar. And a big, obviously huge part of that is the characters and the work you guys did on that. And not just like the honor of like being able to like collaborate with you guys on that or just see it or ask you guys questions about it, but there probably won't be another time in our lives we're going to walk into something that already has this amazing legacy, and you guys already, two of the best living actors already have these characters figured out for how many years? 15
decade,
years?
yeah.
10 years. And you guys already have every little nuance figured out. You've lived with it for so long. That's a huge opportunity. And it's also a lot of pressure to get it right. I remember when we were on Moon Knight with Ethan Hawke in Moon Knight, and he was talking about the work that you did. Yes, he's like my best friend, Vincent. I have such an admiration for what he's done with his character on Daredevil that I feel like here on Moon Knight, if we can capture that spirit, that ambition of doing something like that will be in good shape. And he would motivate us by telling about your successes here.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
That's
nice.
But it's also like it's very humbling, very kind to hear that. But also so when you've played a character for this long, one of the dangers is that directors come in, they don't feel like they can tell us things. And the truth is, we don't want that. We want input. We want to see. You easily can kind of forget or misinterpret a moment or a scene or forget where you're coming from. And it's really important to have directors that can find that balance between honoring, respecting what you bring to the character, but also, identifying areas where maybe we could try something different, and maybe there's something here that you haven't quite seen. And when you find that collaboration, it's kind of priceless.
What's interesting is I think our earliest conversations were just trying to find like. You had to kind of spoil your process a bit for us. You had to tell us your character's secrets.
Right.
But once we understood those and what your pain and pleasure principles were and all of that, it felt like once we knew that, our job was to just capture that honestly, and then we could all play around, and we could push in one direction or another because we're not making like a base misunderstanding of like, is this scene scary, or not, and that was like so helpful as those early conversations of all the groundwork you guys have. You might even think it's obvious, and it's not. It's very deeply buried in there, and we're able to kind of run along with a camera after that.
Charlie, please don't take this the wrong way, and this may sound really silly, but what's so funny is that obviously you play an American in the show. I don't think Aaron and I fully comprehended how much of a character that is until we met you and got to know you. We're like, oh my God, it's a completely different guy.
That's so funny. That's funny. Yeah.
That's a compliment. He's not going to take that.
Charlie Cox can see.
When people ask me about the character and how he's different from me, the thing I always talk about is like in real life, I'm like such a people pleaser, and I don't like anyone feeling uncomfortable and stuff. And what's so fun about playing Matt is he doesn't give a shit what people think.
Yeah.
He will tell you exactly how it is and let you handle your own feelings, and it's actually quite freeing.
The only thing is you do have that heavy heart of darkness and deep dark past. Same thing.
Vincent, so Fisk seems to have stepped away from his life of crime. Is it fair to say that, I've only seen the first two, is it fair to say that that's true, that he's...
It's not fair to say that.
Okay.
It's nice to say it, and I think he felt the same way. I think he was trying to live in the daylight, and I think he'll continue to try, but I think the struggle gets harder and harder, and but the guy is on a mission. His mission is to stretch out his reach as far as it will go until he's stopped somehow. And he's accomplishing that in this first new season. There's nothing but badness that's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is the kingpin of crime ultimately,
Yeah.
right? Okay. When we start off the first 15 minutes or so, which don't involve Fisk quite yet, but it really does feel
15
like...
minutes is okay.
You can handle that, right?
16.
It really does feel like the original show in terms of, Foggy and Karen and Matt are back together. How intentional was that for you three in terms of trying to maintain or bring back the feel of the Netflix show, even though knowing that this show is going to be something different and move in other directions, of course. Were you really working to try to bring that feeling back for fans of the Netflix show?
One of the things that is so admirable about the Netflix show is the way that it feels. It kind of has a really specific tone. It's really hard to hit because it's about people and it also is about heroism. And often those two things start feeling arch if you start doing it wrong, And so getting the feeling that you have in the very beginning of like a warm hug, right? Of seeing the characters we love back together and seeing that they've evolved in some ways and trying to get that out of the way, like what happened in the last 6 years. It was really important because it is called Born Again and we're going to blow all that apart. It is a new story.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's no secret that there was a kind of a slight shift in direction halfway through. One of the things that we'd tried to do early on, which we have all discussed and we totally understand an admirable thing to try and do, was do something a bit different. We're lucky that we work for a studio and we work for bosses who were willing and excited to do that, and also able to see when it wasn't quite working and pivot. One of the things with the show in its first iteration was to kind of distance ourselves a little bit from the history, just a little bit, maybe just to not reference it as much. And so when the pivot was made and these guys were brought in to help us bring all the previous shot material together with new material that had been written and was being added, was to tie the history back into the show. And so we, doing that early on in the first episode, in the new pilot that Dario wrote, our showrunner, was, one of the first things that was talked about and needed.
Well, thank you so much, guys.
Thank
It's
you.
really
Thank
a pleasure
you.
to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck with the season
Thank
and
you so
season
much.
2.